Hope your Shabbos was good, your weekend was good. We tell this story about a guru who was sitting somewhere in the mountains of distant Tibet, and he was sitting outside. Around him were all of his disciples. And the topic of discussion, what he was sharing with them, was the need to become angel-like. You have to separate from the physical, coarse, materialistic world, and you need to focus more on divinity, focus more on spirituality. And he was talking a lot about this concept. And during this conversation, the topic turned to angels. And he was insisting that if you are going to work on yourself, if you'll separate from the mundane, from the physical, from the coarse, you become like an angel. Spend less emphasis, exert less energy. Don't care so much about materialism, he said. You'll become more spiritual, more defined. And these disciples are sitting around and they're taking it all in and they're really trying. They want to become very spiritual, very godly, somewhat connect and feel divine. And as he's talking outside, it gets a little darker and darker. The sun sets completely. So they light a bunch of lanterns all around. And they're sitting and continuing their conversation. Then it's time for dinner. So one of the disciples comes out and he brings a large tray with a very good fatty steak, stack of plates, and a pile of forks. And whenever they're going to be done their conversation, when he's going to be done his lesson, they're going to have dinner. Well, someone miscalculated something about the lanterns, and they're sitting there, and it's getting dimmer. The aroma of the meat is really getting to them, and their stomachs are turning, and they want to enjoy this meat, but part of them is pulling in the other direction. We're trying to be like angels. We want to be spiritual. We want to be holy. And as they're doing all this, the lanterns get extinguished. There's no more light. No light. And all of a sudden, you hear a screech, ah! And the lantern goes back on, and you see the guru, his hand is on the meat, and in his hand there are a bunch of forks. Our parsha talks about, the parsha this week we're going to read, talks about the high priest in the holiest place in the world, in the Beis HaMikdash in Yerushalayim. I want to talk for a moment about three levels that exist. Okay, you have the world, which is space, location, area. You have time, a year, a week, a month, an hour, time. And then you have the person. It's called the soul, the nefesh. Three categories: location, time, and people. Now, when it comes to location, when it comes to geography, it starts with the world, the earth. Within the earth, there's a higher level than just earth, and that's Israel. It's the Holy Land. It's God's gift to the Jewish people, special place. There's an added holiness that exists in Eretz Yisrael, in Israel, that doesn't exist in other places in the world. It's more spiritual, it's more holy. Not that we always feel it, not necessarily will you always see it, but it's holier and more spiritual. Within Israel, you have Yerushalayim, right? Jerusalem, it's holier. It's the holy city of Yerushalayim. Within Yerushalayim, you have the Beis HaMikdash, the temple. And in the temple, you have different areas. You have the Kodesh HaKadoshim, the holiest place of the Beis HaMikdash. When it comes to people, to times of the year. You have a regular, mundane, a simple day of the week. It's a Monday. It's not a holy day. It's not some kind of extraordinary spiritual energy that exists on this day. It's a day of the week. Beautiful. But then you have holidays. And a Yom Tif, a holiday, is a more spiritual, more godly day than a typical Tuesday. If you go a level higher than that, then you'll have Shabbos. Shabbos is even holier than holidays. They have rest. It's Hashem's gift. But then we have even a more holy time, and that's Yom Kippur. Kippur is the holiest day of the whole year. It's an extreme spiritual energy that exists that, according to many opinions, even the day itself brings atonement. Just the fact that it's Yom Kippur, there's different opinions. Do you have to show up? Do you have to fast? Do you have to do tshuva? Etc. But however we're going to understand it, the reality is that the day itself carries a certain holiness. The day itself carries a certain spirituality. It's holier than any other day. That's time. Then we have a third category, and that's creations, okay? People. When it comes to species, so you have the daimon, which means the inanimate object, rocks, soil, dirt, dust. It's inanimate. Then you have a level which is greater than that, and it's called vegetation. Things that grow, grass, trees, flowers. They're much more significant in the sense of they have more energy, more life, right, than a stone. A flower grows, it runs the risk of withering away. It has to have sunlight, it has to have water. It doesn't last forever. It has the ability to blossom, to change, to progress. That's what a flower is. That's what anything that grows. That's really what it is. But then you have a level 3, and that's even higher than inanimate objects, even higher than things that grow. You have animals. Animals, of course, are reflexive. They have instincts. They react. They communicate. It's a much higher level of consciousness than even vegetation, which is more than inanimate, right? It could communicate to a great degree. Within that, you have a next category up, and that is people. People, of course, are on a greater intellectual level, greater consciousness than animals, which is greater than vegetation, which is greater than inanimate objects. Within people, within humans, you have the Yidden, the Jewish people. Within the Jewish people, you have 3 categories: a Yisrael, a Levi, and a Kohen. And when I say greater, their calling, their responsibility, their purpose, their mission is greater. They have to do more. Every person in the world, every human being was created for a reason. You can't discount and say that person's unimportant or that individual is not necessary. It's one of the main differences, it's one of the fundamental concepts that you find between Judaism and other schools of thought. In other religions, for the most part, the goal is that you have to convert other people to get them to believe like us, which kind of makes sense. If you believe that your way of worshiping Hashem, if your connection, if your religion is the most important, then you're going to want to get other people on board. If not, you're kind of selfish. Some religions go to the extent of sharing that if you're not going to join our way, if you're not going to do our thinking, if you're not going to be the way we believe, then in the world to come, there's all kinds of punishments and even doomed and all the kind of things that we don't believe in. Judaism, on the other hand, says, no, you have to be who you are. If you were born Jewish, that's your calling, that's your mission, that's your purpose. You have to maximize that, learn more about it, connect with it, that's who you are. If you were not, you were born something else, then that's your calling, that's your mission. As long as it's not idol worship, that's your thing. Do that. You don't have to become Jewish. On the contrary, it's even discouraged to become Jewish. If somebody wants to convert, they're not welcome with open arms during the process. Once they convert, they're in like anyone else. But we're not looking for that per se. That's a very big difference. I just say that because we're talking about this category of creations, of humans, and we're saying levels. It's not to say that there is some kind of problem if someone's not Jewish. You are who you are. You're created for a reason, and no one else could do your mission, your purpose in life. You have to do that to the best of your ability. Within the Jewish people, you have Israelites, most Jews. Then you have the Levites, and then you have the Kohanim, the priests. And the Levites assisted in the Beis HaMikdash, in the temple. They helped with various tasks. They played instruments, they sang songs. The Kohanim, the priests, were representatives of all the Jewish people, and in certain instances of the entire world. And what they did was they brought offerings, sacrifices, they lit the menorah, they served in the temple for the entire nation. Within the Kohanim, you have a higher level, and that is the Kohen Gadol, the high priest. High priest, and this is what our parsha tells us this week, the high priest would go into the Holy of Holies on the holiest day of the year. So you have the holiest person, the holiest human around, which is the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, going into the holiest place physically on earth, which is the Holy of Holies in the temple in Yerushalayim in Israel. And when does he do that? He does it not on Shabbos and not on any other holiday, and he does it on the holiest day of the year, on Yom Kippur. Now there's a condition. The Torah says when he goes into that location, which is just for a few minutes, for a very, very holy task, he goes in, and the Torah says he will atone for himself and for his family. Okay. Of course, he offers a prayer on behalf of the Jewish people, and he prays for the coming year, and he asks God for forgiveness. But there is this reference, him and his family. So the Mishnah, in the beginning of it, it's called Yuma, it's the volume which discusses Yom Kippur, tells us that he'll atone for his family. His family means, it teaches us that he has to be married. Okay? So the holiest person, the holiest day of the year, the holiest location, what's important? That he should be married. Which sounds kind of strange. Now we're talking about marriage on Yom Kippur, the holiest day of the year. Think about it. And this is, by the way, the Jewish law, that if this high priest, 2 weeks before Yom Kippur, his wife, heaven forbid, died, he is unfit. He is disqualified from serving in the temple as the high priest on behalf of the Jewish people. Can't do it. Why? Because his wife is dead, which is terrible. Not only is he now a widower, but he also loses his position. Unless he gets married, if he gets married right away, then he can come in. But we learn from here that the high priest must be married in order to serve in the temple. And the question is why? Let's just say that he's in his 90s, okay? And he doesn't have a wife. She went to the world of truth. What are you going to do then? And the answer is really the secret, if you will, or the fundamental concept of Yiddishkeit, of Judaism in this sense. And it tells us as follows. In many other schools of thought, in many other religions, in many other belief systems, your focus is on separating from the mundane, distance yourself from materialism, and live a life of aestheticism. Separate from physical pleasures. Disconnect from the material world the way we know it. Don't be so coarse. In Yiddishkeit, in Judaism, it's the other way around. Okay? In other religions, for example, the holier you are, the less you're involved with the world. If you're a priest in certain religions, you're not allowed to get married. You spend a lot of time in seclusion. You spend a lot of time in just, I don't know, an attic somewhere, separate from the rest of the world, because the more spiritual you are, the less physical you have to be. If you want to become like what we started with, if you want to become more angel like, right, be less physical. You want to become more divine, be less coarse and less materialistic. Okay. The problem is, and this is what I started with, that story of the guru and his disciples, that it's easier said than done. It doesn't work because we're physical beings. We do have to eat. We do have physical needs. We're human. Okay? So technically speaking, we are a soul in a body. And the soul in the body requires to work with that body. You can't disregard the body. You can't say, I'm a soul in a body, but I'm not going to eat. Or I'm not going to care what I eat. Or I'm not going to focus that food is healthy and nutritious. I'm going to neglect my body and not work out, not exercise, not get fresh air. It doesn't work. The soul is in a body. That body has to be protected, has to be maintained, has to be cultivated. It's just so, if a person is going to say, you know what, I'm going to stick to some kind of spiritual way of living, which is going to consist of disconnecting from the world, number one, technically it won't work. Humans are not angels, and you'll never become an angel. There's a few exceptions, right? Elijah the prophet, was Pinchas, who later became an angel. But the general population, 99.99999% can't become an angel. Just doesn't work that way. That's technically, but fundamentally we can't do that either, because all of these other religions that I'm referring to, these are human productions. In other words, it's a logic conceived by a person, produced, decided how to do something. Torah is from Sinai. It's God's wisdom. It's God's will. And we're trying to connect with God, not with some idea of aestheticism, not of some idea of being separate from the world. Now, what is Hashem? What is God? Is he physical or spiritual? Is he mundane or is he divine? He's obviously divine, but is he spiritual or physical? There's a story said about a mother who was struggling with her kids. She had two sons, one was 11, one was 9, and they were always getting into trouble. Whatever went wrong, they knew it's one of these two boys. And indeed, I mean, a window broke somewhere in the neighborhood, it's them. A bike is missing, they probably took it. Someone's air out of their tires are out, must be these two boys. It was terrible. And she tried all different disciplinary ideas. She read books, she consulted with experts, nothing worked. And she was watching if the way this goes, these two kids are going to be criminals. But one day, this great famous rabbi comes to her city. And she decided, that's it, I got to go talk to him and ask the spiritual man if he could talk to my kids. And he agrees. So they bring in the older son first, and he goes to visit this rabbi wherever he was staying. He comes into his house, he gets into this room, and the rabbi looks at him, and with very stern face and a loud voice, he says, "Son, where is God?" He looks at him, he's like, so he looks even sterner and louder and deeper, and he says, "Son," I said, "where is God?" The kid's standing there, he's 11. After the third time, this rabbi is standing up, he's shouting, "I said, answer me, where is God?" The kid runs out of the room. He runs back home. He grabs his brother, pulls him into a closet, and he says, Chaim, God is missing, and they think we took him. The question is Hashem spiritual or physical is the answer. And God is not spiritual nor physical. He's not limited to one or the other. He created heaven, he created spirituality, and he created physicality, and he created everything that goes on in this world. And therefore, you could connect to Hashem, you could become spiritual using spiritual methods or material methods. You could connect with God both through prayer and through very high spiritual contemplation, and reflection, and learning. And you could also connect to Hashem through very physical things, through eating, through your marriage, through interactions with people. Yes, through exercise, through working out. You're not limited to connect to Hashem in a spiritual versus physical, because that would limit him. That would say, God, he's spiritual. God is not physical. And the reality is that he's neither. And therefore you could connect to him through any of these manners. And that's why the high priest, the Kohen Gadol, his purpose when he would represent the Jewish people, he has to be married. Because it's not about disconnecting. It's not about separating. Frankly, the whole purpose of being in this world, the reason why our soul descended into this physical world, is to go into a body and to bring out that this body can connect. This physical body could be spiritual. That's really the point. Okay? It's not that they're two separate entities. They are, but the point is to bring them together and to reveal, to bring out, to express that in our physical bodies, we have spirituality. What's the purpose of all this? So the Medrash, which is the same era as the Mishnah, the Medrash tells us that Nis'ava HaKadosh Baruch Hu, God had a desire, I don't want to call it a temptation, but he had a strong urge to have a home down here in this physical world. Okay? A urge means I wanted it. I can't explain to you why. I wanted it. I wanted a good piece of steak. Why I wanted it, I can tell you that it tastes good, but there's other things that taste good. I can tell you that, it's not so good for you. I want it anyways. When a person has a taiva, when a person has a desire, when a person really wants something, there's no rationale. There's no explaining. I just want it. Now, I could stop myself. I could control myself. I could have some self-discipline, but the explanation is irrelevant. And very often there is no explanation. There's no rational reason. Why do I want this? I don't know why I want it. I just want it. And Kabbalistically, the source of desire, where it comes from in your soul and where it's rooted, there's many, many reasons. But very often, I want something, right? You decided you want to buy a new car. Right? Why did you choose that car over another car? Status? There are many other cars you can get for status. You took the blue one over the red one. Why did you take the blue one? You like it. You want it. You don't have to explain to anybody. You could come up with good reasons. The blue has a better resale value. You could say that it sticks out less. You could say all different things you want. But ultimately, when it boils down to it, you wanted it. You added reasons to it very often. Okay? Hashem also had a want. He wanted to create a home down here. What's so cool about having a home down here? That it's not immediately apparent. Meaning in the physical world, you don't see that there's God. And making a home for God down here is like a challenge that we bring it out, we express it, we make it happen. In our context, what it means is we're in the physical world and we're being spiritual, not by separating from it, but by having meaning in it. Okay, this is why the second half of the parsha talks about immoral relationships. And all different types of relationships. Forbidden, prohibited, incestual, and so on and so forth. Why is that here? Why? First of all, you read that on Yom Kippur. Second of all, we just spoke about all of the services of the high priest in the temple and this very spiritual life. And at the same time, we're talking about relations between men and women, what's prohibited, what's permitted. I mean, who's permitted, who's prohibited, and so on and so forth. And the truth is that the male-female relationship is not just for humans, right? It exists also in the animal kingdom. It exists even in vegetation. When it comes to an apple tree or a date tree, you have the masculine, the feminine, etc. And they have to connect with each other. Even when it comes to inanimate objects, take electric, right? You have the plus and the minus, right? You have the outlet. You have it going in, and you have the insert, and you have the receiver. The concept of male-female is so physical; it exists on every single level: human, animal, vegetation, even inanimate objects. And Torah comes along and says, you know how you say marriage in Hebrew? In Torah terminology, kiddush, holiness. That's where you'll have holiness. That's where you could have some of the greatest spiritual levels. Is in that case, is in marriage. When done right, properly according to Torah. We're learning in the Talmud, the volume talks about Saita, which is the woman that's suspected of being unfaithful to her husband, and being with someone else, etc., an affair. And how the Talmud discusses how do you ascertain if she actually did it or not, and the process involved, and giving her the chance to admit, but she doesn't have to get any punishment, and so on and so forth. But there's a reference there where if you look at the Hebrew word of ish, which is man, and the Hebrew word for woman, which means isha, each one has one letter of God's name. Ish in Hebrew is Aleph Yud Shin, which is man, but the Yud in middle is God's name. A letter of God's name. It's the Yud. If you take out that Yud, it spells Aish, fire. The woman, how do you say a wife in Hebrew, a woman in Hebrew? It's Isha, which is also Aish, fire, and a Hey at the end is the second letter of God's name. So Torah is telling us that Ish and Isha, if they are meritorious, meaning if they are deserving and they're behaving the right way, and it's actually the way God wants, then they have God among them, which means blessing, peace, everything is great. But if not, then Aish, it's a fire on both sides, consuming type of fire. Talmud goes on to say that the woman's fire is stronger, etc. But point is that on the one hand, you have the concept that it's so physical and mundane, a relationship, male, female, husband, wife. But no, that's exactly where the spiritual experience is realized. Because God is not spiritual nor physical. He's everything. He's not limited. He created both of them. This is also, a couple of weeks ago, we learned the laws of kashrus, of kosher, right? It's food. In food, we have the ability to connect to Hashem. Food, which is so fundamental to our existence. It's not just for humans, it's also for animals. Also, vegetation needs it, right? Even inanimate objects, they need energy in order to function, right? Think about a car, you got to put in gas. Think about your phone, you got to charge it, right? You have to have spiritual energy. And you would think that why is that energy spiritual? Why is that energy any type of godly connection? It's just food so I could exist. But that's exactly what Chassidus teaches us. That your physical experiences are really spiritual. That's where it's at. Okay? Torah comes and says, your dining room table, your kitchen table, the table that you eat at, that's an altar for God. Really? An altar for God. In the temple, when you had to pray, when you had to bring an offering to Hashem, and you were connecting, and the person was atoning for his sins, and you were growing, and you were thanking Hashem, and you were fulfilling your promises, etc., etc. Okay, an altar is a holy place, holy object. But your kitchen table, you're just enjoying the food. No. Torah says, do it my way, do it God's way. Eat for purpose. eat to have spiritual energy, eat to connect with those that are closest to you, eat for the right reasons, it becomes spiritual, it becomes an altar of connecting to Hashem. There's a story about a woman by the name of Sarah Yocheved Rigler. Now, she she found Judaism. She was Jewish, but she found Jewish life at the age of 37. Okay, but the 17 years prior to that, she was exploring. Okay, so she was looking for spirituality. She was in all different types of places, exploring, doing, so on and so forth. Now, one of the things that she learned in all of her meditations and spiritual seeking over 17 years in India was that having children and spiritual pursuits are not really going to go hand in hand. You're going to be busy changing diapers and nursing babies, and waking up in the middle of the night to deal with them. Your meditation and your aestheticism and all that type of stuff, separating yourself from the world, not going to work. Okay? You'll need to choose one or the other. But after 17 years, she decided she wants to maybe search a little bit more for an answer. Is taking care of children a problem or not? So she went to Israel, and she found a Rebbe by the name of the Amshinover Rebbe, very holy, special person. She goes to his house. She knocks on the door, and she's going to ask him if he feels that being spiritual is a contradiction to raising children. All the way around. Is raising children a contradiction to spirituality? She gets to the meeting, she comes into his house, he's sitting by a table, and she sits down, he welcomes her, and she's about to ask him the question. She thanks him for his time, and she introduces herself. But she didn't realize that the dining room where they were sitting, there was a baby in a cradle, let's call it a stroller. And the baby starts to cry. So he excuses himself. He walks over to the baby, picks him up, and he soothes him, and is holding the baby on his lap. Now, she understood that this Rebbe has 7 children. And as he's holding the baby's looking at her, he's looking at her, she wants to ask, is it okay, having children, raising children, taking care of a baby, is that a contradiction to seeking spiritual life? And as she's saying that, the words are not coming out. I mean, she's looking at a baby. The baby's looking at her. She sees this great Rebbe. The Rebbe is looking at her, and she's going to say, how is that spiritual to hold a baby? And it really changed her perspective. She saw it in real life. And she ended up becoming more involved in Judaism and raising a Jewish family and so on, just from watching that. But this is the concept, and it's so often misunderstood. We think that if you're spiritual, that you can't be physical. Or the more spiritual you are, the less physical you'll be. It's not the case. The other way around. When you find meaning and purpose and direction in your physical, that's how you become spiritual. The more that you are in the physical with reason, I don't mean gluttonous. I don't mean just someone that wants to be materialistic for the sake of materialistic. But he understands, or she understands, that there's a purpose in life. The purpose is that the neshama comes into this world to use this world, to bring out every physical part that has a reason, and there's a goal involved. I'm making a home for God where I eat, where I sleep, how I interact, everything from food to marriage to any experience. If it's done right, that's spirituality. And it has meaning. What happens is your whole life becomes holistic because every part, is leading towards the same thing. And you have a certain peace with yourself. It's not, the morning is going to be God. The afternoon is my time. The afternoon, in the evening is going to be some other. Everything I'm doing is leading to the right place. It doesn't mean I'm praying all day. But when you eat, you make a blessing. You're eating the right food. You're enjoying the food with the right people for the right purpose. Food is spiritual. You're going to sleep. Everything is spiritual. Everything has a purpose. So have a great purposeful day. And thanks for watching. Please take a moment and share, subscribe, like. And I look forward to seeing you tonight, 8 o'clock Chicago time.